Hey journal besties, it's your girl Amanda Maid, and in today's video we are breaking in my 2025 reading journal. Finally, this baby here is a labor of love and I love her so much, but we've got to make a couple corrections before I can start using her to her full potential. Today we're going to make some regular updates to my annual spreads. We're going to make a couple corrections to some systems that I just want to tweak a little bit. And then we also need to make a new challenge spread for Adventure in Aeldia because there's a whole new map this year. So let's get into it. I hope you enjoy. Even though I've been using a reading journal for a few years now and spent a lot of brain power planning out my journal, I still find it necessary to make adjustments to systems that aren't working for me along the way. In today's video, we're going to make those tweaks and updates so that I can begin using my favorite journal I've made so far. I have already been able to tick one goal off the list, which was rebinding a book, and I had so much fun doing so. One thing that I wish I had in my journal last year was a master list of everything that I was reading with the books in order. So I made a page called the Captain's Log, where I would document each book that I read with some pivotal information, such as the order I'm reading it in, the rating, what format I read the book in, like was it audio or physical or ebook, how long the book was in either hours or pages, and if I owned the book, borrowed the book, or bought it new. These are just statistics that I personally like to track, but this type of format could work in any journal for a number of different types of information. I was able to read 10 books in January, which gives us lots to update in my journal today. Then I take all of that information and compress it into a total for my monthly statistics, and I fill it into this grid in which I call the bounty. My Once Upon a Time page is the first page I want to make changes to. Initially, this page was supposed to be where I track those awesome first lines of a book, the lines that really pull you in. But unfortunately, all the books that I was reading in January had really weak first liners, and I decided I wouldn't have enough space for all of that anyway. So instead, I'm summarizing each book into a simple sentence to jog my memory of what I read throughout the year. To give you an example, the first book I read is about two sisters who share a husband. That says enough for me to remember. Jumping ahead to my series tracker, this is a system that I've used the last couple years that I already know works for me, but I did need to create a color key so that I could begin using this. I selected colors from my Crayola Super Tips pack, which comes with a ton of colors, but unfortunately these markers aren't labeled. So what I did is I took some Scotch tape and kind of wrapped it around the ends of the marker and marked off which month I wanted to use that color for. So for all my January updates, I'll be using this blue marker. Also, Editing Amanda realizes that I never colored in the boxes on the top of this page. That has since been corrected. Anyway, for these updates, I take my January marker and I fill in all of the books that I read that were in a series that I'm tracking. I color them in with that corresponding color. Then, if I finish the series, I go over to the side and color in a black box to show that that series has been completed. If it's a series that is not going to have any new additions this year, but will be continuing in later years, I'm going to create an empty box that has an arrow inside it. And that's the system that has worked for me for years, and I'm probably going to continue using it. Jumping over to Buried Treasure, my unread library. This is my physical TBR, and all I do on this page is color in the books that I read in January that I already physically own. Some of these are already filled in with a gray marker because I was able to finish those in December, but I was able to read 6 books off my TBR this month, so I'm quite proud of myself. I know I have a long way to go, but it feels good that this page is finally getting filled in. The next page I only want to make some subtle changes to. This is my new hauls page, and it's where I track all of the new book purchases. I'm trying really hard not to purchase a lot of new books, but when I do, I want to know if they were books that I had bought because I had previously read them, if they were books that I immediately fed to my Kraken, or if they were gifted to me. So I just wanted to have a master list and a way of tracking if I'm actually immediately reading the books that I'm purchasing or if they're just contributing to my endless TBR. I did pre order Onyx Storm, so I'm counting that as a haul for 2025. My next spread is a challenge to read 25 books with my eyeballs this year. And when I do, I'm going to draw in the spine of the book onto this page. Now, last year I did this, but I accidentally drew in all of the spines upside down. So I don't want to do that this year. I'm going to use the book as a reference, but essentially I'm just going to choose a book and copy the spine to the best of my abilities, trying to match the font as closely as possible and fill it in with some of these little details. I think at the end of the year, this will be one of my favorite pages, and I hope it motivates me to actually sit down with a book more often like I used to, instead of relying solely on audiobooks. The Bone Houses was a complete surprise for me. I read it for a January readathon and ended up giving it 5 stars. This is one of the books that has been sitting on my shelf for probably 3 years, and as soon as I started reading it, I could not put it down. On deck is my page to account for all of the anticipated reads I have in 2025. In January, there were 5 anticipated releases, and one of which I read in December, and then I also read Onyx Storm in January. So I'm marking Onyx Storm off with my January marker to show I read it this month. I had the pleasure of reading The Vanishing Bookstore by Helen Pfeiffer a little bit early, so I am pasting in a book cover under my ARCs page, and ARC stands for Advanced Reader's Copy. I don't read too many of these throughout the year, but when I do, I like to commemorate those reads with a copy of the book cover. Jumping into a couple quick updates, starting with buddy reads. Like most of the book community, we're going crazy over Onyx Storm, right? It's the new edition in the Empyrean universe, and you either love it or you hate it. I definitely think this series is so much fun, even though there are a lot of issues with the writing and the editing. But overall, it's just really fun to enjoy the hype. So, me and a couple friends definitely did a buddy read. So, shout out to Bex and Liv and Sharifa for reading along with me and the awesome Discord chats that we've had. I also like to account for the books that I'm reading in 2 of my book clubs, which I call Book Besties and Book Babes. So the books we read were Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano and Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner. Next, we get into my reading challenges section. I love a good reading challenge, and I fill my journal with a lot of different ways to incentivize my reading throughout the year. Starting with a year in readathons, this page is really simple. I'm just pasting in basically the logo of the readathons that I participate in. In January, I participated in 2 readathons. One is called Adventure in Aeldia, and it's part of the Magical Readathon hosted by G at Book Roast. And the other readathon is Winterween, hosted by Gabby Reads. Winterween is a fun week-long reading challenge, typically based around some type of thriller or horror books. Either jumpstart your reading for the new year or pick your reading back up in the summer months. I'll go into more detail about Adventure in Aeldia a little later in this video, but first I want to talk about my destinations page. This is intended to be a page where I write in all of the places that I traveled to in 2025 through books. However, I made this page before filling out my 2024 version, and as you can see, even just listing the names filled this whole page. So I already preemptively know that I'm not going to have enough space to do the same thing this year. So I'm thinking I need to insert some type of tip in, or maybe only write in the names of like fantasy locations that I visit to. I'm not really sure. So for now, I've just listed where I've traveled to this month, and I'm going to kind of keep it in my journal on an aesthetic post-it note in the meantime until I figure out what to do. All right, the Battle of the Kraken is my TBR game to help incentivize me to read the books that I physically already own before going out and hauling new books. So, in the month of January, I read 5 books that were already on my TBR. I bought 1 book, which I read immediately. So, based on my criteria, that counts as reading 6 books, and I fed the Kraken 0 books. Had I bought the book and not read it immediately, that would count as feeding the Kraken. So instead of putting myself on a very strict book buying ban, I made it more of an incentive program so I can buy books when I want to, but I have to earn them first. So some of the ways I can do that is to either finish a series that I'm in the middle of, finish a backlist, which you see here, some of my favorite authors in the backlist I'm reading through, or read 10 standalones from the TBR. Each of these equal a new book. I decided to take this one step farther and create little loyalty cards to help me track as I complete these different challenges. This here shows that I finished the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber, which consisted of 3 books, and my reward for that was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. So because I've made these new cards, I want to stick this in this little pocket, and I'm going to move my back lists to the back pocket of my journal. To keep track of my standalones, I made a stamp card called the TBR Loyalty Card. If I read 10 standalones from my physical bookshelf, I earn 1 reward book. So I just have the date that I finished the book, which book it was, and then I can take either a sticker or a hole punch, and I can punch off the books that I completed. Is this necessary? Could I just do this in my notes? Absolutely. But is it fun? Absolutely. So once I finish up this card, I'll earn another book. And then finally, I made a 3rd stamp card, and this is specifically for an end of the year book haul. Me and my friends like to go to Barnes & Noble when they do their 50% off hardcover sale at the end of the year. So this will help me earn those books. So I can earn those by getting a bingo as part of my reading challenges, completing my 25 eyeball reads, successfully battling the Kraken, finishing my ABC reading challenge, finishing my year in Aeldia, and finishing my 7 Seas challenge, which we'll get into here in just a moment. These are just backup cards for as I continue reading throughout the year. So I'm going to couple these with my back lists and put these in the very back folder of my journal. Now this is a lot less cluttered and it gives me the information that I currently need. And lastly, I just need to check off that I earned 1 book. For my Sail the 7 Seas challenge, I have not completed any books on this list. Essentially what this is I've chosen 7 seas, and if any of the border countries along each of these seas appears in one of the books that I read, that counts for that prompt. I've made a list of all of the countries that qualify for each and even planned out a couple books to read, but so far this year, I have not read any on this list. Bringing us to Year in Aeldia. This is one of the pages that needs to change for a very good reason. If you're not familiar with the Magical Readathon, essentially it's committing to reading 1 book a month, and then there are 2 readathons throughout the year. In the last 2 years, we've been navigating a map to reveal our prompts to us. But this year, the map looks very different. And because of that, this spread no longer works for the way we're doing things. And because of that, we need to create a new spread. So this is the new map for 2025 year in Aeldia. Let's get into it. So after a lot of thought, I decided that I wanted to take this map and create some type of French door system so that my map of everything that I've been reading throughout the year isn't so condensed into a small space. So to do that, I have taken the map, cut it directly in half, which is fine because most of the information is not in the very center anyway. And I'm just going to create some doors. So first I'm using some washi tape to adhere it to the page, doing the same thing on the inner flap of the door. And then I'm going to reinforce it with some Scotch tape. Now, I'm not worried about what this looks like currently because we're going to cover all of this up. I just know that this spread is going to get used every single month and therefore I want it to last. So I want to make sure I really reinforce these flaps so they don't fall apart halfway through the year. And then I just repeat the process on the opposite side. One thing that I feel like I've committed to for this journal is weathering every single edge of this book. So all I'm doing here is tearing off the farthest row of the page, and then we're going to distress it so it looks like an aged journal. And for this, honestly, the messier the better. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I'm using this distressed ink set, which is just a sponge and an ink pad, but you rub it over the torn edges and it gives it kind of that burnt weathered look. Again, I'm not too worried about what this looks like right now because I'm going to be putting other papers on top of this. I just want to make sure that there's no bright white page peeking through because I don't feel like that fits the aesthetic of the readathon. I want it to feel a little bit weathered and worn out after our travels. So just doing well to get all of the edges really well. So for the actual borders, I wanted to use some stationery that kind of fit with the color scheme. So I'm pulling some out of my little book of maps and ledgers, and I found this map of Turkey and, neighboring countries that fit the color scheme really well. So if you see your home on this map, let me know below. But I'm just going to be cutting this into columns for either side to give it some background noise. These two side columns are going to be placeholders for what I read during the spring and fall equinox. These are the 2 points during the overall readathon where my character goes back to a magical school called Aurelium Academy and studies her trade. So during those 2 points of the year, there are more books that you read within the month, and I wanted a place to write those in, even though I will likely be doing spreads within my monthly journaling. So this will just be a quick glance at what I read during those 2 sessions. And then on the inner flaps of the doors that we made, I'll house all of the monthly selections I've made for the readathon. There is a big Discord server for everybody participating in this world, and everyone's been sharing their new layouts on the Scribe Tower tab, and I've just been loving seeing how everyone is setting up their pages. Essentially, we all have the same information and the same map, but everyone's journal looks so different, and I just think it's so fun to see what people create. So I had a thought for a way to use this extra bookmark that comes in my Archer and Olive notebook. One side has a charm, but the other one is just plain. So I thought, why don't I create a character that can actually roam around this map? So instead of using my Aeldia character, I'm going to use my animal familiar, which is a bear named Bo. And I'm just going to make him a little player that can roam around this map as we, choose our selections for reading this year. And all I'm doing is sandwiching that ribbon in between two pieces of paper, one side having my character, the other side is just a plain piece of cardstock, and lots of glue in between to hold it together. I still need to get some of that tacky glue stuff, but I'll put that on the back of my bear so that wherever I want him on the map, I can just stick him into place and he can roam around. And I thought that was a fun thing because I always have this page bookmarked anyway, so I thought it would be fun to add that little character to the bookmark. So again, these inner pages are going to house all of the monthly selections that I'm making as I travel around this map. So first I just want to come up with some kind of backdrop to the book covers that are going to be placed on this page. So I wanted to pick something kind of more neutral, and I ended up going with this dictionary typography backdrop. So I'm just cutting this up into pieces and pasting it into those flaps, and then cutting around the edges so it fits within those doors. My adventure in Aeldia spread from last year was one of my favorite pages, and I like looking back at everything I read throughout the year and remembering choosing those books and talking about them in the Discord, and it's just a very fun readathon to be a part of. So if you are considering participating in this, I highly encourage you to join because it's so much fun. Next, I am laying out where I want to put all of the book covers. Last year, I did not have a place to really showcase the prompts. I kind of just did the book covers and the month. So this time I wanted to include some papers to write down which prompt that I chose for my character and which direction she was headed. I'll be using the same banners that I made last year on Canva. And if you like the look of these, you're welcome to a free printable that you can find in my community tab. Once I finished the layout of everything, I just glued everything in place and created a little path to follow each of the choices. And I love how it turned out. I think this will hold all of the information that I need for the readathon quite nicely. And my little bow, he's so cute. So now the question is, what do I do with the spread that I already created for Year in Aeldia? And I think the easiest solution is to go back in time and do the 2023 adventure. So I just printed out the 2023 map, and I will use that to cover up the map that I used as a placeholder. And now I can just go on the adventure as I want. A lot of these prompts from 2023 are pretty generic and can be applied to a lot of books, so I'm not worried about adding another prompt to my list. And I probably won't be strict with myself on reading that prompt for that month. I'll just try to finish all of the prompts before the end of the year. All right, catching up on some other challenges. We have book bingo, which I didn't read any of the books on this list this month, but we can fill in some love letters, aka the alphabet challenge. So this spread is just reading a book for every letter of the alphabet. And January is obviously going to be the biggest update because all of the letters are free game. So this month I am able to put 7 books on the board, 7 out of 26 letters. And I'm excited that this page is already looking so filled in. Up next, we have Treasure Trove. This is a page that I set up in December just to mark off when I was completing each book. I'm using an X to mark the spot that I found the treasure, and an X with a circle to mark off when I'm completing a book with my eyeballs. I like this system so much better than drawing a calendar every month. That is it for the updates. I hope you enjoyed and come back to another video real soon. Bye!